them once and individually target them, whereas the base one maybe only let you do one target at once. So it's sort of it'll be a combination. It's going to be a combination of a sort of partly informed by real world stuff, and then partly informed by kind of what's sort of cool science fiction fantasy. But I always like to have the idea that you ground it like in sort of some real world stuff. So like, I mean, a good example is like the 300i. I mean, I definitely saw a lot of people saying, why do you have wheels on a craft? Why don't you just have
roll it around the deck?
Exactly. And that's the thing is, yes, of course you can have, anti-grav, or you can have your VTOL thrusters, but like an F-35 can already do, they can do that, but it's got wheels because it's a lot easier for you to wheel it around. It's less energy expended than like to lift off and move 10 feet and drop
same
down.
reason helicopters have wheels sometimes on the gear, or they put wheels on there. They have things on the deck, they fucking jack that thing up and just wheel it around. So
Yep. Totally. So so we sort of do try and do a combination of sort of partly informed by real world sort of considerations of design. I mean, there's a lot more industrial design. I mean, we're still making, obviously having fun creatively, but there is definitely more industrial design that goes on the spaceships that are being designed and built than in any game I've ever done before, because we're thinking about like, how do you get in the ship? How do you exit the ship? How would it land? How do you bring cargo in? How do you do, all these things that typically in the past it was just it was a ship that you never really got inside and didn't have to move around inside. It was just sort of like you clicked on it and you're in it. So we have to design all that on the current ones, and it's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun challenge for the artists, and it's a fun challenge on the programming side of it.
All right, I'm happy to hear it. So going back to something I mentioned in that last tirade I went on, the electronic warfare, is that going to be something, like I said, point, click, activate, lock, whatever, or is it Eve style where it's fucking boring, or is it going to be more you can have dedicated players sitting there at the console actively doing things? Is it going to be a challenge? Can we have, because I noticed, for example, on the Constellation, you've got 3 pilot crew positions, looks like. 2 up front and 1 that's kind of in the middle and back. I assume that's pilot and command. What are those other 2 guys going to be doing? Is that electronic warfare kind of stuff, is that going to be something that we can actually sit there at a console and do? Or, targeting, gunning, any of that sort of thing? Because in the real world, that's what happens. You've got people that are dedicated to those things. Is that going to be similar?
No, so 100%. So the design of the multi-person ships is deliberately designed for that sort of cooperative play experience. So yes, you can fly a Constellation by yourself, and say you can pull the turrets, and the turrets can gang to where you're looking. So think of that like I don't know, like on an Apache where you look around and the turrets will go. But it's much more effective if you had individuals in those turrets, because they can independently target different targets at the same time. And the same goes for running things like electronic countermeasures or whatever. So in the bigger ships, there are multiple stations and seats. So in the bigger one, like the Idris Corvette, which perhaps we may show some stuff later on, and the Carrier and other bigger capital ships we do, there are dedicated sections where you would sit in that seat and be in charge of that. So for instance, you're in charge of sort of the air combat operations that are happening, say, on the Idris Corvette has, say, 2 or 3 fighters that can fly, and you can be sitting at like this big holosphere, and you can task the people that have flown off and say, go after this target, go after this target. And the same would be for scanning and electronic countermeasures. I mean, there's going to be a whole bunch, like the idea is to have a huge amount of depth on all those features. I don't want it to be just a point-click boring thing. I don't want it to be, anything that's sort of kind of automated, where it's not really anything other than a dice roll. I kind of want to have some level of skill, and that would even include things like mining and stuff. But essentially, there should be level of skill in terms of balancing and adjusting your systems and tweaking them, and then deploying and using them.
Okay.
So just, like on the countermeasure side, there's a whole bunch that you can do on your ships in terms of how your